Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentians that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? District Stairs is offering a 10% discount store-wide, plus free shipping. So if you've been wishing for a new living room, kitchen, or bathroom, we've got an array of tiles, vinyl, laminate floors, glass railings, glass shower enclosures, trims, and countertops to suit your taste. Check out our website at districtstairs.com or call us 289-200-7649. We're also on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Season's greetings from District Stairs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of On the Spot. My name is Jamali John, and I'll be your host for this evening. This evening, we'll be looking at a very interesting topic. The topic for this evening is law, morality, and justice. Is there a need for law reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And I'm very happy to have some very competent panelists who will be joining me this afternoon, who can give us, we can benefit from their experience, their knowledge, their insight. And I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. We have Rene Baptiste, we have Kezran Walters, John Balla, and Joshua Badu. Joshua Badu is, of course, joining us online, but the others are here with me in studio. So we'll start with my dear sister Rene Baptiste, and we'll make our way around the table.
Good evening once again. I'm Rene Baptiste. I've been a lawyer for a number of years. I've also had the good fortune to be a lawmaker for 10 years or so. And I think that we will try to bring to bear experiences from both sides of the fence, so to speak. I practice mainly in the civil court, and I have young partners who do practice in the criminal court. So I have some information that I can share with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kezran Walters. I'm a Crown Counsel in the Chambers of the Honorable Attorney General. I do mainly civil practice and legislative drafting on behalf of the state, and it is my pleasure this afternoon to speak on the topic of law reform. I do hope that I can bring my limited knowledge to bear, especially in light of my senior, who is sitting immediately to my right, who brings such a wealth of experience in the law. And I do hope that we are able to enjoy this afternoon's proceedings as we edify the populace of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Balla. I am a police officer, and it's truly an honor to be here with such an esteemed panel. I'm also a barrister and solicitor. I've been a barrister and solicitor for the past 5 years. I would have mostly practiced criminal law. I am, as I noted, I'm a police officer. I'm an assistant superintendent of police, and I'm currently in charge of the legal research and policies unit within the Royal St. Vincent and Grenadines Police Force. And I truly look forward to an engaging discussion with the panel, and I do hope that I would be able to contribute meaningfully to this discussion.
Good evening, everyone. Good night to everyone tuning in. My name is Joshua Badu, and I am also a barrister at law and solicitor in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am currently attached to the Law Chambers of Bruce Law Chambers Incorporated. I am passionate about human rights. I'm passionate about uplifting and helping vulnerable and discriminated groups of people in society. I have a LLM in International Human Rights Law, and therefore, tonight I hope to be able to make a meaningful contribution where I can, especially maybe as it touches on human rights or international human rights law. I am also the president of a newly formed nonprofit organization, Equal Rights, Access and Opportunities, SVG Incorporated. It's truly an honor to be here tonight with all of these esteemed and magnificent persons on the panelists and also the host. It's truly an honor to be here tonight. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful to these gentlemen and our lone sister for taking the time out of their very busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. And I'm hoping that we can all learn together this afternoon. And of course, we're coming to you live from the Facebook page of Asbot News Network and IKTV as well. So we're going to take our first ad break now, and we'll be right back where we'll jump straight into the topic for this evening: law, morality, and justice. Is there a need for law reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? District Stairs is offering a 10% discount store-wide, plus free shipping. So if you've been wishing for a new living room, kitchen, or bathroom, we've got an array of tiles, vinyl, laminate floors, glass railings, glass shower enclosures, trims, and countertops to suit your taste. Check out our website at districtstairs.com or call us 289-200-7649. We're also on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Season's greetings from District Stairs.
Welcome back. And if you're just joining us, my name is Jamali John, and I'll be your host for this afternoon's program. And the topic that we are looking at this evening is law, morality, justice. Is there a need for law reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Now, when I saw this topic, my mind went back to, I believe that was 2007, because before I went to study law at the University of the West Indies, Cayville campus, and then on to law school, I did do law at the community college. I did Cambridge Law under now deceased Miss Smith. And in my very introduction to the law, perhaps one of the first classes that we took, of course, we looked at the definition of law. And these three happen to be presented in those introductory classes: law, morality, and justice. But they were introduced in a very interesting way. They were put on a Venn diagram, and the author was basically explaining that there is an overlap between law, morality, and justice, but they are not the same. And I found that to be very interesting, because I think there are some persons who might struggle with the idea that even if there's some overlap, they are not the same. So I want to begin this afternoon by asking our panelists, what are their views on what that author had to say? Do you believe that law, morality, and justice are the same, or should they be the same? Let's start there with our definitions of the three, and whether or not we are of the view that they are the same, and if they should be the same.
Young people.
Okay. Well, As young practitioners, the heartful debate would not be too far removed from our learning. There is one school of thought, the naturalists, who believe that laws should be informed by mores or morals. And then there are the positivists who believe that laws should not be informed by morals, but one should be free to do as far as he can do without hurting his neighbor. This brings to bear the dichotomy between law and morality. And I do believe that in our laws, there is a great reflection of morality, particularly in the criminal law. There is all of the crimes, for example, if you think about theft, the Bible tells us, thou shalt not steal. It also tells us, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not destroy. And these would be reflected in the criminal laws as well. But the positivists say that I should be free to do as far as I can without hurting you, my neighbor. So if I want to engage in some acts within the confines of my home, then that should not concern you, and the laws should have nothing to do with this. And this is the positivist view. But then there is justice. How do we treat with justice? Justice has been traditionally defined as standards of fairness. What is fair? What is right? What is just? And the law should seek to, as far as is possible, preserve these standards of fairness. What is just? What is right? And in so doing, what should it be informed by? Should it be informed by morals? Should it be informed by what goes as the days evolve? The times are ever changing. What should the law be informed by? And this is the debate that I guess we are going to grapple with today as we go deeper into the discussion.
Yes. As Brother Walters rightly noted, there are many different views as to how one should see law and one should see morality. I personally believe that law and morality, while as noted by our host, they overlap. I do think law and morality are two totally different concepts. Morality, in my opinion, tends to come from our norms, what we believe in, what we grew up with. So morality tends to, while it is not law, it tends to come from the eternal law. And Kesron rightly spoke about what the Bible noted: thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. And whether or not these beliefs should inform what our laws are is really up to us, in my opinion, as a society where we want to go. And we as a Caribbean people tend to look outside for laws and feel that the laws from England or the laws from the United States would be better. But if their laws are informed by their moral compass and how their society runs, should all laws also be informed by their moral compass or our moral compass? So to me, that is where the law and the morality overlaps. But they are two totally different concepts, and out of law and morality, you would see, based on what your society deems to be moral or deems to be legally right, then you would be able to determine what justice would be. Okay.
Maybe we hear from Mr. Badu as the human rights specialist.
Badu?
Hi, good evening, everyone. First of all, I think looking at these concepts, law, morality, and justice throughout human history, based on the time period, the location, there's obviously overlaps. There's obviously going to be times whereby one concept influences the other. When it comes to law, for those who may not know and who are viewing, laws are basically a set of rules that are created in society that govern that society, govern that group of people. How these laws come about can be through different ways. As my law friend, Mr. Waters, said, when it comes to laws, there are different schools of thought, and two of them are the naturalist theorists and the positive theorists. Basically, following up from what my law friend said, and also to add, the natural law theorists, they believe that the law is derived or influenced from the divine or from a higher power or from religion. That's basically in a simple way to explain it and to add to what my law friend said. So laws derive their legitimacy because, for example, in Christianity, persons may believe in Jehovah, Yahweh, whatever they may call him, and they believe that he created certain principles, certain moral standards, and these inform how the law is created in society. And then we have the positivist theorists who believe that, laws receive their legitimacy because persons, for example, in power in society, create these laws, whether it's a king or parliament in the community, and they set the standard that they think society should follow. So, for example, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have parliament, and based on the constitution, they are the ones who are mainly responsible for creating laws, for the good governance of the state. And they would use various things to inform how they create laws, why they create laws, and so forth. When it comes to justice, as my law friend rightly said, this deals with fairness, this deals with what is right, and all of those different notions. And at the end of the day, we create laws because we want justice. We want to see justice in society. And throughout history, maybe in certain places now, the law, like in Islamic states and so forth, religion plays a very heavy role in laws and the creation of laws, or the divine. But in other states that are more secular or atheistic, if a state can be called such, even though different influences from religion may exist in society, they may not solely use what standards come from those religions to influence the creation of laws. They will look at all the factors, all different criteria, different circumstances, different forms of evidence to decide whether a law is valid, whether we should create a law, whether we should repeal a law, and so forth. Speaking of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we see even in our constitution that there is some relationship between law, morality, and justice. Because when we open our constitution, one of the first things we may read is that, I can't quote the exact quote because I don't have the constitution right in front of me, but it talks about the nation being founded on the belief in God or something along those lines. We notice that this does not say Christianity. It does not say Christian religion, Hindu religion, Islamic religion. And there is a case coming out of Canada that talks about how just because God is mentioned in the Constitution doesn't necessarily mean that the Constitution or the state is a theocracy. The mention of God basically goes back to the origins of, what laws may be based off of and influenced off of, which in some cases involve religion or morality. But it basically prevents the state from being totally seen as a theocracy. Because we're more St. Vincent and Grenadines, even though we are strongly religious, we're not a theocracy. We're more leaning towards the secular side of things in terms of how the society itself is governed and structured. So there definitely is a relationship between law, morality, and justice, especially when you look at our colonial past and how that has influenced St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the development of our laws, the development of our institutions. We can definitely see the relationship, but that's a whole discussion, and so many things can be discussed and talked about. But that is my submissions for now. Thank you.
Subadu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon once again. It's very interesting for me to listen to this debate among young practitioners here. I was just telling Councillor John that the last time I saw these three words together would have been somewhere around 1973-74, doing a paper. I used to have to do these papers for Law and Society in relation to law, morality, and justice. And you are a young student of the law and just learning 3 years into it, learning what the law is about. So it taxed you to understand this. Of course, after 4 decades, you begin to have a little slightly different view from the view you held when you were a student, because you would have seen how the three principles intersect and interact with each other in the fabric of the society, how the society is governed, what would influence lawmaking, and what would also influence justice. Because in the course of reading so many judgments, so many books, you will always see somewhere along the line, there is always a coloration of morality in the discussion relating to the law, how the law is made, how the law intersects with the society, the evolution in society, how the law would influence that, as well as how is morality, or the discussion of the intellectuals in relation to the influence of morality. And anytime we see the word morality, we always gear towards religious belief. But when the more and longer you stay in the law, you ask yourself, what was the religious or the moral compass in being able to have one of the states in the United States where you can file anything, save money, do whatever, while on the other hand, you have all this other legislation saying that for anti-money laundering purposes, you need to disclose. But at home, you don't need to disclose that. So what is the influence in that particular case for those laws to be so structured? So speaking out of both corners of the mouth, you ask yourself, where is that? Then you look at other directives that will come from, quote unquote, the first world to third world countries, all based on the concept that you're trying to do justice for your country as against what is the justice for the other set of people. So because the lawmaking is all determined by men, well, women, mankind, the role of justice is operated by humankind, and the instincts for the operation of morality in the modern day, and I say the 21st century in particular, it's a little difficult to find those cherries of morality.
Okay. Now, I listened to the introductory comments made by the panelists that we have, and I believe that in society, people don't always readily appreciate the distinction between the three. And I think sometimes people have a level of frustration with the legal system because there is this expectation that all three would mean the same and they should be the same. And so I could imagine that for somebody listening to this program now, somebody struggling with, so you're basically saying that law and justice are not the same. And for me, when I just read it, it was difficult for me to understand and to appreciate. But as Councillor Baptiste was explaining, as you go through the experiences, you get to appreciate precisely, what it means and why these articulations are there. And I want to give two examples on both morality and justice. When I was in law school, we were looking at divorce. And of course, you guys know in St. Vincent, we have a fault-based system of divorce. So if you want to get divorced, you must have a reason. You can't just get up and say, well, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore, I want out. You have to present in your petition a reason for divorce. And under the laws of St. Vincent as well, there is a prohibition on getting divorced within the first 3 years unless there is exceptional hardship. That have a no-fault system. So when they have a reason, your son could just get out. And so as the lecturer was, explaining the difference between the laws and the jurisdictions, there were students in the class who were saying, we need to change this. Why you have to stay married for 3 years? Why do you have to have a reason for divorce? If I want to come out of a divorce within a short period of time, or for reason or for without reason, I should not be prohibited in any way. But when you study the historical context of some of these laws, you get to understand that, look, these laws are put in place because there was some belief at a particular time that the sanctity of marriage should be preserved. But modern day people don't necessarily share that view. And so that is why, as Joshua Badu was pointing out, that over time there has been some departure from what would ordinarily be morality enacted in laws. And as far as justice is concerned, one of the things that I know people struggle with a lot, you have in criminal law, as Kezran mentioned, perhaps a rape, and the victim decides that I don't want to give any evidence. And people in society get upset. So that's the end of the case. They don't go forward beyond that. That's not just. That's not fair. So as you go through these experiences and you see the development of the law, you get a better appreciation of where law is, where morality is, where justice is, how they overlap, but how they diverge in certain circumstances. And people need to if people have a better appreciation for these things, they would be in a better position to make sense of the law, the legal system, and so on. And in the responses that were given by Brother Bala and Badu, you guys mentioned the fact you guys were touching on whether or not law and morality should be the same. And we'll come into that somewhere as we go along, but I want to ask Council Baptiste, how do laws get into the parliament? Now we're going to look at reform. What's the process and the procedure for laws to get into parliament? And we have her here, luckily, as a former parliamentarian and as also a former cabinet member. And a lot of people don't know what the procedure is. Can you give us some insight into what that procedure is like?
Thank you so much for that question. And it is very important for people to understand when you elect a government, you have elections, government, members of cabinet are sworn in, and the parliamentary, the common swearing in the House. In the House of Assembly, that's the place where laws are made. Before you get to Parliament, there's a paper. For example, right now there's a lot of debate about the Public Health Amendment.
Right.
There is an existing Public Health Act. Circumstances have now arisen. So the Ministry of Health will prepare documents based on the background of COVID. What is the best way to deal with it? Is there another law that intersects with it, like the NEMO, where NEMO has a health committee? Because under NEMO, that would be called a disaster. Something which also gives the government then the authority to declare a state of emergency or otherwise, depending on the state, the physical state, the conditions, and so on in the country. They will then, NEMO will also prepare paper, make sure that all the systems are in place, and you see that the CM was ahead of that. So they will then inform the Legal Affairs Department. These are the things we are looking at. Would you please draft the law? They might themselves source precedent, that's what you call existing law already made in other countries, preferably other Commonwealth countries, that will have the common law as a basic law, English common law, and then they would use that precedent. The drafts persons in the attorneys general chambers would look at it, make sure that they cross their T's, dot their I's in respect of are there any infringements on other laws? Would there be infringements on other freedoms? What does the existing Public Health Act says? What is the interpretation of all these sections? Then the drafts people will draft that legislation and bring the draft to Cabinet by the Minister of Legal Affairs. Copies of it will be circulated to the members of Cabinet, and in that Cabinet paper, there will be what you call the background, financial implications, the legal implications, which they would attach the draft document, explaining the sections, why those sections are put there. And then you'll have the Ministry of Finance will say, what are the financial implications if you have to hire extra people, where you're going to source the vaccine, where you're going to source the testing tubes, where you're going to, what will be the cost of that? And all of this goes into making a law. So you don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to do a law for this. It has to go through those steps to know what are all the implications, the background, the financing, the legal implications, the rights, etc. If you have to have new mechanisms for the enforcement, since it will be dealing with penalties and enforcement, they may ask the Commissioner of Police, pass it by him in his administrative office. Do you have enough people to do this? Before it actually gets to the order paper. And it goes on the order paper by the minister who's responsible, the Minister of Health would lead on that bill, or the Minister of Legal Affairs would lead on the bill. So you have the presentation and the Minister of Legal Affairs. So it goes on the order paper. The order paper goes out for Parliament, and then you have in Parliament the first reading, the second reading, the third reading. The first reading, name and title. The second reading is intended for it to go to select committee. The rules permit for you to have all three readings at one sitting, or when you reach to the second reading, you can refer it to a select committee, and the select committee is usually members of the government and members of the opposition in proportion to their numbers in Parliament, and you would select persons who have a specific input to make, which would be health, education, legal affairs, police, because you look at the subject matter.
Technical experts.
All the technical experts who are going to be there to assist as you go through at the second stage if you're going to do a select committee. It may be that there's a sufficiency of information already. So you simply have all three readings on the same day. Where it is intended to go to a select committee, as I said, you will have select committee of both sides. And in this century, the lead of the House business would ask the clerk to invite persons with interest. I'll give you another bill. the cannabis industry. So they invited all the persons who could possibly have an interest, persons who are growers, persons in the commercial sector, the persons from overseas who have done this work before. They would invite persons who have done this before. For example, in Jamaica, where the laws were already in place to a certain extent, to come and make presentations. They would invite people from the religious community to be present to make an input. So that is how laws are made. You don't just, when I look at Facebook and so, I see the remarks people made that this one politician just made this law. One politician can't make a law. There are so many disciplines that go into making that law. Then that is discussed at the select committee, and you have meetings and meetings and meetings. Persons who are totally unfamiliar with law, but they have views, they have opinions, there are comments to be made. So that is the way these days you do legislation, where you get those persons to come and make comments. And they made a valuable contribution. Because remember, you're coming from as a government minister, you have a certain perspective. You do not know what these growers know. You do not know what they know about how long the seeds for this. You don't know what the pharmacists know, because you're not trained in pharmacology. So that's the reason for having the pharmacists. Then the business people will tell you what is in relation to how is this going to unfold, who's going to sell it, how is it going to be sold, what is going to happen. Then you have people from Jamaica, and those are the people who had gone to the debates in the United Nations, because there is the drug. You would know that from the police side, what the convention says. And if we are signatories to the convention, how do you get past those particular barriers? So all of that goes into making law. So you have, for example, the making of the Public Health Amendment and the making of the cannabis, where one went through that big, long procedure, publish it in the newspaper. Now you have, under the public health, you're doing the regulations. Normally, regulations are done by the minister in consultation with the draftspersons at the ministry. And they will go through it and say, these are the sections that should be taken out, they should be put in. It goes through a good, rigorous testing day. That doesn't say you won't make mistakes, that there would not be certain things you didn't see, because you have a tendency to see things from your own prism. And sometimes your prism is not as informed as it should be. And so you have to test it. And what lawyers do, while we work by precedent, we also have to look at what is the local circumstances, what is the environment in making that law, how would that law roll out, who would it affect, what would be the financial implications.
Okay.
So,
thank you very much for that comprehensive breakdown. And I want to invite the other panelists to come in on this question, unless they have anything to add on that. What informs the legislative agenda or the priority list? So we're talking about reform, and the Vincentian public, they have areas of law in their mind that could benefit from some reform. And they could easily feel, okay, we have time to deal with this, we have time to deal with that, but what about these other areas? And they feel as if, areas that are important to them are left out or left behind, or just don't seem as a priority. What are some of the factors that influence the priority and the agenda? Because I imagine, especially with that lengthy process, you can only enact or amend or repeal so many laws in any calendar year. So I imagine that there has to be some measure in place to determine what takes priority and what's not that pressing.
Well, I guess we've come to the law reform part of the agenda.
Yes.
And I would admit that there is significant work to be done in reforming the laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And what takes precedence on the legislative agenda is what is immediately needed and what is foreseen to be needed over the next year. For example, I remember at the start of 2020, the Honorable Attorney General would have stated certain things would have been on the legislative agenda, such as the Legal Profession Act, etc. But then came COVID. And I think thus far there have been maybe about 20 pieces of legislation, subsidiary and otherwise, that have been prorogued, that have been propagated. And that took over the legislative agenda. But if you look a bit further back, you would see what was on the legislative agenda. We had the Prevention of Trafficking in Persons Act from 2011. Coming forward, you had the Child Justice Act, which was done in 2019, because you wanted to make preparations for children in conflict with the law, etc. You had the Occupational Safety and Health Act. I think that was 2017. So you can see the needs of the country are what usually informs the framing of the legislative agenda. In or around 2010, we had a spate of family laws. You had the Children Care and Adoption Act, the Status of Children Act, the Domestic Violence Act. That was between 2010 to 2015. And then if you go even further, you would have had the Education Act of 2006, etc., coming forward. And these show what the government's priorities are for the protection for good governance in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And that is what usually informs the legislative agenda. What do we need over the next year? What do we need to take care of in the immediate future? And what would we need to take care of in the longer term future? And sadly, some ministries would say, but we already sent this bill to the Attorney General's chambers. We need to get it done. But then there are things, that are immediate that the government will need. And if we look at it, there's still a lot of work to be done. I know, for example, ongoing right now is the reform of the employment laws. And there's a Sexual Offences Act as well that is being drafted up. That would reform some of it, some parts of the criminal code. So there are things being done. I know that there was a battery of the agricultural, animals, fisheries legislation done, but that now has to be placed on the back burner given the current climate, the current legislative climate, and what is actually happening with regard to the pandemic. We did have some consumer protection laws in the Consumer Protection Act as well, with regard to law and order itself. I can't foresee any great legislative reforms in the immediate future. With regard to the police, I know that there are discussions ongoing with regard to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act. And that is a huge piece of legislation, and it's going to take some time as well. And that is needed because, it's dated one, and it's cumbersome too, and it needs to be amended for the future. And then there is also the digital transformation project. When we talk about our electronic transactions laws, financial laws, and how we can digitize St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the 21st century, we are a bit behind. But I know that digital transformation project, you will hear more about it in the coming days, weeks, months. There's a lot to be done, and I know the government had also started reforming the land laws, but that is needed maybe about 10 years ago. We absolutely need to move from the unregistered system of land to a registered system of land, etc. There was some work done with the Possessory Titles Act in 2003, 2004, and that was hailed as a really good act. It brought a lot of dead capital alive. Persons who were in possession of lands that they had no title, they now could, by way of adverse possession, approach the court and say, I have been in possession of this land of this parcel of land for 12 years or more in continuous and undisturbed possession. And I am entitled to title to this act. And I think Councillor Renee Batiste would have been in government during that time. And she would have been actively involved in the passage of that act. So there is a lot to be done, an incredible amount of work. And sadly, there are only 2 full-time drafters, but we have been training a great deal of the staff at the Attorney General's chambers, myself included, in legislative drafting. And we are looking to create a new way for drafting going forward, increasing our institutional capacity. And I think we're going to get a lot more done in the short run into the long run.
Okay. Bala and Badu, I want you guys to comment on that same question. And if you guys can comment too, I mean, we heard from Councillor Walters about, the fact that different things affect the legislative agenda. And of course, he mentioned the limitations that they have to work with. But as far as a policy position is concerned, do you think that they are prioritizing the right things, or you? Because, I mean, everybody would, of course, have their own opinions. And when he mentioned the land reform, I smiled because that's one of the areas that I think should be priority, right? Because I think it's so very important. And I wonder sometimes looking in from the outside, why is this thing taking so long, right? But of course, I'm not on the inside, and I would naturally question these things from my limited knowledge of what is transpiring on the inside. But what are your guys' views on the law reform, the pace at which we are moving, the priority areas that we're focusing on? Do you think that there are other things that we are perhaps lagging too far behind on?
Well, well, for me, I think priority is really subjective. And what, as you noted clearly, what I might feel we should focus on is not what senior may feel that we should focus on, or what Brother Walters or Brother Badu may feel that we should focus on. And for me, I might be biased, but as a police for 18 years, I'm hoping that we could get the road traffic and road traffic act and regulation sorted out. I am also hopeful that we could reform the Police Act. I think the Police Act is quite dated. And as the person who has been placed to manage the legal research and policies unit of the Royal St. Vincent and Grenadines Police Force, one of the things that we do is work very closely with the DPP's office. And we would have seen over the years laws such as the witness anonymity legislation, special measures, legislation, interviewing of suspects for serious offenses. We see those legislations coming out and how much they would have benefited St. Vincent greatly, because we had a time where every minute when a matter went before the court, the accused would say, "Oh, the police beat me and I didn't give this statement willingly." And now with the electronic interview legislation, you see where the person is cautioned and they go through the process, and you could see that this person is giving the statement willingly. So as a police, I see how that benefits us, right, and benefits St. Vincent greatly. I am not in civil practice, so I would be more focused on things such as the sexual offenses legislation, because I do think that is in dire need of reform. And you noted something earlier, that when you spoke about justice, and where a complainant would then say, "Oh, I'm not pursuing this anymore," and because I am in this every day, and I see the amount of sexual offenses that comes before the police, and goes before the court and just falls to the wayside, I am hoping that the new legislation will try to address that, to rein that in, so persons could understand that this is a serious thing. So it goes back to where I started. This is something subjective, and what my might say should be priority to help to curb crime. You, as a man who, as you see on the outside looking in, might think the reform as it relates to land should be priority.
Well, let's hear what Badu has to say. Badu, what are some areas you think should take priority as far as law reform is concerned?
My sentiments are in agreement with some of the panelists pertaining to law reform in St. Vincent and Grenadines. It is needed, extremely needed. There are many areas in the country, many areas of law that need to be reformed, laws that need to be enacted, amended, and repealed. There are so many areas in St. Vincent and Grenadines where we are lagging behind, and because I am focused more on human rights and protecting vulnerable groups of people, I recognize the effect of some of our laws in St. Vincent and Grenadines that may not protect groups of people as maybe they should, or they may openly violate persons' rights. Pertaining to laws, in particular, I would like to see, it's very ambitious, but more constitutional reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Hopefully we can have that again sometime in the future. I know an attempt was made around 2009, but for various reasons, that was unsuccessful. There were some good ideas that I liked and other ideas that I was not in favor of, especially coming from a human rights perspective. So I think in the future, constitutional reform is something that we need to have on our agenda, and especially pertaining to the fundamental rights and freedoms of individuals, and even the provision in the Constitution protecting persons from discrimination from state or bodies that have power from the state. Those categories, I believe, they can be expanded, expressly expanded. Then we have other laws at the domestic level that, you know, may need to be amended or repealed, because coming out from our colonial history, that's the thing about St. Vincent and Grenadines. We're a recent independent country on the world stage. We just gained independence in 1979, and a lot of our laws and the state of our laws and institutions today, a lot of them were influenced by the colonial power or powers back then, mainly from the British. And the British have amended, changed many of their laws, while we in St. Vincent, due to our inheritance of those laws, we still have many of them on the books. And those laws may violate persons' fundamental rights and freedoms. In particular, of interest for me is, as my law and friend, Council Bala stated, the criminal code or the sexual offenses that the code deals with. I think a lot of the laws in the criminal code, because it's such an important area, criminal law is something whereby, you know, you're always hearing about somebody being arrested, somebody being charged, somebody being sentenced. It affects a lot of persons in society. And so there are a lot of issues regarding the constitutionality, in my opinion, of some of those laws in the criminal code. The punishments that are being imposed upon persons for various crimes, the uniformity of the laws as they apply to persons who may belong to a certain gender or sex, and so forth. So there are various issues under the criminal code in particular that have struck my attention over the years that I think need to be looked at heavily in regards to law reform. I'm happy that Councillor Waters mentioned that progress hopefully is going to be made, or is currently being made, regarding the sexual offenses of the criminal code. So that's something that's good, and something that, you know, we all would look forward to in the future. Then there are a bunch of other laws in the country that may need to be looked at and determine whether or not these laws violate people's fundamental rights and freedoms in society. Because there's quite a number of laws that I think we need to look at, we need to revise, we need to amend or totally repeal so that we can ensure that all persons in the country are protected and they are not discriminated against in any way. So that's on the domestic level. Then on the international level, SVG, we've signed on to various treaties, and because of that, various obligations arise upon the state to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights in the country. So my priority is the state focusing on amending, enacting, or repealing laws that affect people's fundamental rights and freedom. So I agree with my learned friend, Council Ball, that it's subjective. You go to different persons and they will tell you this is the area that they think needs to be reformed, or that they think needs to be changed, or that they think the government may need to deal with. But human rights should be a priority for the state. So because when we sign on to those conventions, whether we accede to them or ratify them, certain obligations arise at the domestic level, and we have to try as much as possible to have our domestic laws conform with international law. St. Vincent and Grenadines is mainly a part of two human rights systems, and that is the United Nations human rights system and the Inter-American human rights system. Under the United Nations human rights system, we've signed on to numerous conventions or treaties, such as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, etc., etc. And under the Inter-American human rights system, we've actually signed on to very few treaties or conventions. So one of the issues coming out at the international level for me is actually pertaining the Inter-American human rights system. I believe that SVG, we should have a more involved role. There should be more treaties that we are signing on to. And one thing that is noticeable in the Inter-American human rights system, especially, is that SVG, we have not done the necessary steps, to have the Inter-American Court of Human Rights have jurisdiction over us. Apart from the Inter-American system, we also have issues maybe pertaining to the actual domestic implementation of these treaties or conventions. Yes, you sign on to them. Yes, you ratify them, you accede to them, but at the domestic level, you need to actually implement these treaties at the domestic level. So that may be another issue for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Maybe the reason why maybe there isn't as much work as maybe there could be, because I recognize that St. Vincent and Grenadines were a newly independent state, just a few decades old, and we have limited resources, finances, and also persons with the knowledge or resources to effectively contribute to certain things regarding development. And that's why sometimes we need international help from organizations and so forth to help us. But one issue definitely, again, is the implementation of international treaties at the domestic level. I'm also concerned that in SVG, based on my observations at least, we haven't created a national human rights institution at the state level that would protect human rights, that would ensure that persons' rights are being protected, that the state isn't violating people's rights, actively advocating for law reform, and so forth. So both at the domestic, regional, and international level, there's need for law reform, need for us to look at the laws in our country that are affecting persons' fundamental human rights and freedoms, and seeing how we can protect, respect, and fulfill our international human rights obligations as a state. So there's a lot that we can talk about, and I can get and be more specific, but for time, this will be my contribution. Thank you.
We'll take our first break, and then when we come back, we'll take Council Batista's comments on this particular question. Right, so we'll take that break now.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered? Covered by a company owned by Vincentians that understands your unique insurance needs. At Metrosint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrosint General Insurance Company.
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? District Stairs is offering a 10% discount store-wide, plus free shipping. So if you've been wishing for a new living room, kitchen, or bathroom, we've got an array of tiles, vinyl, laminate floors, glass railings, glass shower enclosures, trims, and countertops to suit your taste. Check out our website at districtstairs.com or call us 289-200-7649. We're also on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Season's greetings from District Stairs.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen, and if you are just joining us, my name is Jamali John, your host for this evening. And this evening we're looking at the topic, law, morality, and justice. Is there a need for law reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And just before we took the break, we were discussing what informs the legislative agenda, what determines the priority areas. And we had taken comments from all of the panelists except Senior Counsel Rene Baptiste, and so that's where we're going to pick up.
1906, 1990, 2009. And the distance between 1990 and 2009 is 19 years. And now we are into the next decade. We're ripe for another law reform, another law revision. We just had, for the past couple of years, I don't think Council Walters realized is on there, the magistrate court reform, bail, jury. Those are part of the agenda. And the long-suffering road traffic and motor vehicle legislation. And one of the aspects of it that is catapulted into the public domain is the seatbelt and helmet law, where because of the incidences of, we had a lot of deaths of young people, and you have to have what you call an advocate in cabinet. And in those days, I was a very vociferous advocate when Sir Vincent was Minister of National Security, he was working on the motor vehicle, and asked permission for this particular revision to come. It was in the big bill. Take it out and let's deal with it because the situation was urgent. So we got that dealt with. But you also had, as Council Walters has indicated, we've done some work in child justice and in family law. But we still have the sexual offenses which would affect families, the sexual harassment laws, agriculture, because of the significant increase in trade, and also the increase now with factories doing seafoods. And at the regional level, because of being Speaker of the OECS, there's a whole raft of legislation to deal not only with the law of the sea, but also dealing with agriculture, moving of plants and animals, because we export within our sub-region.
Phytosanitary standards.
Right. And the land law. I can tell you this much about the land law. This is a project that is financed through the OECS to do tackle by registration. The act is actually drafted, it is finished, but there are some technical issues because you will have to do significant amount of some training, and we would need our new law code, our new high court offices. That is part of the problem.
Laws of justice.
And the survey, I think they have done some digital work on the lands in St. Vincent. They've done some work on that. You see, sometimes when you come up with an idea of something to be reformed, we all take it for granted that tell the draft people and let them draft it. But we don't see from the outside what are the implications that are necessarily cross-referencing. We put in the institutional capacity to deal with it. Look, at now we have a research unit in the police department, but we ought to have had that maybe 5 years ago. Now that we have persons who are trained as lawyers with some years behind them, you can then have a research unit so that the AG doesn't have to take somebody off of drafting to go and do that research because the police now have a research unit. So the agenda, one, you have an agenda which you call the short-term agenda, two, the medium-term, and the long-term. Some things get moved up by the process of nature, either souffle, hurricane, or pandemic, another pandemic. That will change what the order of the reform. The other one for the law revision is some more work in relation to the motor vehicle legislation, because when that was originally done, we didn't have the cameras and the routing and the new poles up and all of that. So now you have to have those, you want to cover those in a more efficacious way. Then the courts, the reform of the law courts, the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. We now have e-litigation portal. With the last to come online, 42 matters already in the new portal. And in this part of the law reform for the courts is also the new Court Fees Act, is to start the process of giving the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court the beginning of a fund to become even more independent from the financial resources of the respective governments, just the way like when the CCJ was established. So that you get, some items will get pushed to the forefront, because you have a driver. And the driver for the court is the Chief Justice. She's driving that process. People are lobbying. So we reach this stage where I think that because of the size now in these little countries, as Mr. Bardo was able to say significantly, all these treaties that we, after independence, we started going to the treaties dealing with child rights and family rights. And then you have Shang, who is at the UN dealing with those whole there's a lot there for law reform. We ready for it, ready for reform and revision, because there's some laws that will be new and there's some laws to be revised. As you say in the criminal code, that's for revision. And for the last 10 years, there's been work on it, but I think too sometimes Not that you're knocking anybody, but sometimes there needs to be a driver to drive the process. And when we were driving the AG on the fees for magistrate court, $50. No, that's not the price now for what? You understand what I'm indicating? And they need more help. The idea with bail, there's a draft bill that came out from the Impact for Justice and one also from the OECS dealing with the questions of bail. So you have to take it a little piece at a time, station bail. And let's change that so people don't have to stay long ago. You make people stay over Friday and so on, and Carnival, and the misbehave, you let them stay in jail till Carnival finish, and that sort of thing. So there is need for a law revision and law reform. The reform in the things dealing with title, motor vehicles, those are things that need some urgent attention. But as I say, we need more talent because, 4 of you with legal drafting qualifications at the Attorney General's chambers.
And we will add 2 more shortly. 2 more will graduate this weekend. Kudos to the Impact Justice Program.
They have financed that, but that's financed by the Canadian government, right? Yes. And then we have for the attorney, the DPP, with the prosecution service. There's some other things that she wants to introduce in her office. So there is something on track, but I think there's a need for much more talent, and so that more of the things could be streamlined. Because while you tick off what you've mentioned them there, with the human trafficking and the child justice and the occupational safety and health. When you did occupational safety and health, I was Minister of Labour. When we started that process, I used to be Minister of Labour 2010, this is 2020. But at the time, what were you looking at? What the ILO consultant was looking at? Brewery, cement, construction, mostly the construction and the manufacturing. But you did not look at other services where occupational safety and health is indicative and is integral to those services. So you now have to look at a little section to include that, the way that when they did the Employment Relations Bill, to include the sexual harassment in the employment bill. And that bill, last week, they had a consultation with the Chamber of Commerce and interested sectors. So hopefully you could see something coming up. But there is need for a fast forward, 2, some more depth to get persons in with legislative drafting experience. And the only time you really understand this is that you have to be back in the scene, behind the scenes, to see what legal drafters do. How many times they have to cross-reference and call in their colleagues in different countries and so that you put a piece of law there, nobody sees this because you're in the haste to get it done. And then you have a huge conflict arising. And that conflict is seen by a practitioner. Because the practitioner is looking to get the sense of it. He's looking also if he's for the prosecution doing a contract or if he's for the defense. And the lawyers see these little holes and people say, oh, but that ain't fair. Now, that is just.
Very good point there. Now I want to ask this question, right? And I'm looking at the comments that are coming in online too. And I listen to the radio, I read the comments on Facebook just like everybody else. And I made a short list of the things that people seem to be most concerned about. Mm-hmm. So the topics that often times come up, the age of consent, people always talk about that as a problem. They complain a lot about sentencing in criminal law because they don't understand how is it that serious offenses sometimes get slapped with these minor sentences. And of course, we're going to ask you for patience and that because we recently had sentencing guidelines that are
teething.
Yeah. So, we're going to have to give that some chance. We have buggery and same-sex laws that has been topical not only in St. Vincent but around the region, around the world. People have complained too about importation of sex toys. People ask me all the time, Jamali, why is it that it's illegal to bring in sex toys in any country? And I never have answered to that question, but I get asked that question fairly often. People are concerned about taxes and how friendly country is to, investors coming in light of our tax code. And of course, Council Walters mentioned the digital world, and if we are keeping abreast with the changes that are happening globally. And of course, persons are concerned about the application of the law. We always hear people complain about in mainstream media all the time about there being two faces of justice in sentencing grenadines, and they don't feel like the laws are applied equally. We have criticisms that the rule of law is being trampled upon. And the question that I want to ask is, as far as law reform is concerned, do you have to be in cabinet to effect change? Is there any way the ordinary man can get involved in this whole process of law reform? So if you see an area that you figure could benefit some from reform, how can you get involved? What can you do? Or do you just sit by and wait until the politician gets up and decides to do something about it? How can ordinary
That's the
people?
thing with law. Remember, when you read your constitution, it says who does the supreme law? Constitution is the supreme law. There's a section in there, and then you say about parliament. So we have to do things. You can't, the ordinary man, yes, he's important because he voted. And so when the ordinary man votes, that is the process of it getting the lawmakers in to carry your agenda. Because you do speak about this in political meetings.
Yes.
You raise these issues. Secondly, the ordinary man gets involved at the select committee level. You went to a select committee meeting, you will see a lot of ordinary people. For example, the friendly societies. People know them, Bonpan, St. Patrick's, you want them to leave and stuff. That's ordinary people. They're run by ordinary people, not people with MBAs, but the friendly societies. Because they had issues, remember a lady rang a bell by one of them and all this and raised her issue. But she didn't know at the time that there is a whole big thick thing like this being prepared because of those complaints. Plus you have to move, we have the financial services sector, we got the FIU, the FSA, they're doing their work, that's their agenda. And out came this friendly society. At the select committee stage, you had persons from the Christian Council, several of the friendly societies, ordinary people who make up the book when you go to pay, they were there advising the lawmakers who are on the select committee of parliament, the MPs who were elected, telling them, well, when they say, could you translate this to me? I don't understand what this section means. And so the legal drafter with the minister will go through it and say, this is what this section means. It means at the end of the year, you must send this thing to the FSA, you must do this, you must, the whole system. Then the time span they're giving you to bring yourself in all of this was explained. That's where the ordinary man gets an opportunity, and they're ordinary people. They're not an MBA, and they're not lawyers. So they were present at it. Another place, politicians don't live on the moon, they live here. When they're driving, going to work, they listen to what people are saying on the radio. They hear what people are saying, plus their constituents tell them, look, why can't deal with this age of consent? You want to know what you're doing with that. Then you have to remember that we are part of a system, Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court system. So you had the guidelines were developed, and we have to educate people more on the court system, I think, because people really don't actually get it. Some people. The Chief Justice, she is by law the person with 2 or 3 justices to create rules and guidelines, how these things are to be done, because you have a separation of powers. There's the executive, which is the cabinet, the legislative, which is the opposition and the government, and the judiciary. The judiciary takes care of the sentencing guidelines, not the cabinet, not the commissioner of police. He's not there. This is done by the Chief Justice. It came out, and especially these days, everything is Facebook. put out there on the website. It was digitally sent to everybody. Let's hear your comments. Let's hear what you have to say. And I think 1 or 2 radio stations did the responsible thing in asking to have a lawyer come and explain some of these. But it's very tedious, it's very long, and people's interest is 10 minutes. You're not going to get them for more than 10 minutes.
5 minutes
So
to
then they
finish it.
hear the magistrates, because the magistrates had to have training in the sentencing guidelines. Dr. Jason Haynes was one of those persons who was involved in guiding as an academic and as a practitioner, guiding, because you try to get a cross section. The Chief Justice didn't just sit down home by her window and write this and call it the other justice. No, they sat as a group and they had people from academia and practicing and the registrars of the court and so on, and they sat down and did these sentencing guidelines. They live in this community, so they know what people are saying. I think you better change how you sentence for this particular offense. There was even a training session here, I think it's around 2018. They had a training session. A lot of police officers came to it, a lot of detectives came to that training session. The ladies in the sexual offenses unit, they came to that training session. So there was training done, and sometimes the media doesn't follow this. Because this thing talking about sentencing guidelines is sexy until something happens. Then people say, but what Bonnet say again? No disrespect meant to His Honor. What did he say? Or what did Chief Magistrate Brown say? Or when they hear Justice Cottle when he's talking about a particular matter. It is out there in the public domain. So maybe it's a good idea to do maybe one of these a term with the young practitioners talking so that people will get a little better idea of how these sentencing guidelines are rolled out. I think they have rolled out some more recently for manslaughter. I think also some more sexual offenses, robbery, burglary, aggravated assaults. Some more guidelines have been rolled out, asking for some more information. And I really would encourage people, the same way you go online to see who have been vaccinated parties, go and see that, right? go and see it, it's there. It's not like long ago, people do these things and it's behind closed doors. So that is one of the issues. I know, I see the debate about the importation of sex toys. This, as you know, would have come from the traditional old customs regulations that were in place before God in heaven knows all of us were born.
Is there a need for reform though?
Do you think there's a need?
No, it's not me.
No, don't people are, it's in the public domain.
Yeah,
People are talking about
it all the time.
So obviously, somebody could lead the debate, get people from customs, people from law enforcement, people from what you call the morality police, not the Taliban, the morality police, to sit down and talk about these issues, because those were things, for example, you would not talk about years ago. People would never raise or mention them.
Yes.
But because we are living in a completely different age, where in some places, some countries, it's difficult to tell what is the truth and what is the lie. Even your eyes are lying.
Yeah.
So that and governments are moved by being informed. That's what moves governments, being informed. And the investor friendly, I agree with you. There is a project, I don't know if Kezran is aware of it. Impact for Justice has been doing, there's been some work being done on business names. There is some work to emerge on the Companies Act, because it is quite, it's a lot, some of the compliance things are quite onerous. And the move to make a holistic Companies Act, which would encompass different portions to deal with international business. Are you going to put them on the level, because of the tax implications, will you put them on the same level as the local or domestic companies, and how that would be dealt with, and the compliance, because we're competing with the rest of the region, 1. 2, you're competing with suddenly different states, Delaware, South Dakota, in the United States. You're competing against that. for the inflows, investment inflows, where people prefer to keep their money stuck up there? Would you want them to come in this region? And just lately, you would have heard the discussion, which we have to be aware of as attorneys, the discussion of America being in our neighborhood, but the kind of monies that are spent elsewhere rather than in this neighborhood. I think it's Ambassador Sanders who's talking about it. That someone, you add up the amount of money that is spent in this region by the United States, which is the behemoth there. When they cough, we catch a cold. But the amount of money spent elsewhere when we're right in this neighborhood, and we can deal with some of that money to build us. Yes. But what would then be the investment environment for that money to be here? I mean, when you hear 18 billion gone someplace, you're looking around to find out, well, where is it? And the rule of law. Very often we hear that the rule of law is being trampled upon, and it's a debate. And those that I always say it's, how should I say? It's one of the sexier terms. It's one of the terms people roll off their lips, and then when you challenge them, tell me when you say rule of law, what do you mean by the rule of law is being trampled? Does anyone prevent you? Where do you go to adjudicate an issue or problem with the application of the rule of law, the application of the law, the upholding of the rule of law? Where do you go to do that? Does anyone interfere with that process of that third branch of our democracy? You've got cabinet, executive, you've got parliament, the legislative, and you've got the judiciary. Is the judiciary in our island, in our jurisdiction, afraid or not applying, seeing that the rule of law is upheld? Because once you use those words, anybody who's a judge or a master or somebody says, but things come before me, I deal with it, account it comes before me. And as you know, as attorneys, the reforms that have started since 2000 with the new CPR, introducing mediation to try to lessen the cost of access to justice, the cost of civil suits in particular. And I know that what is going to be rolled out even further is the more mediation in family matters, even though it has started already, but they are doing some family law guidelines in relation to mediation. They're preparing also, should we have mediation in criminal matters? Because instead of blocking up the magistrate court with every little slap, every traffic offense, could you have it dealt with separately at mediation, certain criminal matters? Those three, family, criminal, and I think a third one that they're looking at, and the establishment of a commercial court. And in the establishment of a commercial court would then mean more access for business people to arbitration rather than going to the court, filing a claim, blah, 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 blah. Even though we have in quite a few business matters, commercial matters, being referred to mediation. And it's beginning to work. We have the lowest record in the Eastern Caribbean. Grenada has the best record, the very best record for mediation. So that process has started with the mediation. It was in the rules, but didn't roll out until 2003, 2004. But it's happening more often. They're discussing now if you must have to harmonize the fees across the Eastern Caribbean. So instead of in one island, where BVI is kind of like outside with the business, the level of business there. If you will have among most of us in this side of the Eastern Caribbean have the same fee structure for mediation. And how do you measure means? Because there are a lot of poorer persons who would want to make use of that. So I get to the rule of law. Everybody hears. You're in business, you listen to the radio late at night or early morning, you hear about that and the application of the law. People do feel, and you cannot deny that people are not seeing these and saying, but they don't apply. That don't apply to us, It applies to only them people there and that sort of thing. And it's because principally people also, maybe we have not enriched the fabric by our teaching, the public legal education. in relation to how does this work? Because somebody may see a guy got his license suspended and another one didn't get it suspended. He had a friend inside it. But he didn't know that he got suspended because 3 times they warned him. But they only see him on once. So what is it? And I think the access to the social media, with everybody putting it on there, there are some people who do put on malicious information and not information that is accurate. Maybe partly to spark discussion, but sometimes you can see the hand of mischief to get back at. And so that's why you have the cybercrime, to watch that thing with the cybercrime, because it can be very vicious in a small country. We're not a big country. We tend to compare ourselves to Canada, and in America, there are 400 million people. Goodness grief. We have 100,000 people as the people in a tower. So, but I think that we could, more can be done. I think in the way of public education, I think more can be done. And also there's a perception sometimes that they made a complaint to the police public relations. And the answers that are recorded in the press, because we rely on what you see in the newspaper. When you read the answers, it's sanitized. That is, it's according to form. You're not going to say anything different. And if you take 4 or 5 newspapers, you'll see it as almost the identical words. This matter is on the investigation. We have taken the report from both sides. And it's sanitized. So somebody reading that who's not a lawyer, not a police officer, don't particularly have any friends anyway that can push an issue. You say, but it's 3 times I see them say the same thing. People need to have a comfort level that they feel that what they're asking about or what they read about, that it's taken seriously and equally to another person who makes the same complaint.
That is true. I want to take Badu on this, and then we come around this way. With Bala, and we come back to Council Walters. Council Badu, how can ordinary people get involved? And in your introduction, you mentioned that you founded a non-profit, and you have a master's in human rights. You mentioned your Equal Rights, Access and Opportunities, SVG Incorporated, and I know that you also have an empowerment column, and not just if it's a weekly column, but how can ordinary people get involved in law reform? Is it restricted only to those who sit in cabinet, or can ordinary people get involved? How can ordinary people get involved in law reform?
Hi, good night, everyone. Thank you for your question, Mr. Jamali John. I truly appreciate it. Yes, in my own little way, I try my best where I can with, my limited resources to educate people and to empower persons where I can. Yes, I have an empowerment column with the Searchlight newspaper, in which I've taken it upon myself to, where I can, to share information, to sensitize, to educate the public who may choose to read my articles so that they could be more informed about their rights and their freedoms and about human rights in general. So if anyone is interested, they can check out my articles with the Searchlight newspaper. I'm also very passionate about human rights, passionate about uplifting vulnerable groups of people, persons who are discriminated in society. And in St. Vincent and Grenadines, we have very few civil organizations that are dedicated towards human rights issues, that are dedicated towards uplifting vulnerable and discriminated groups of people. And my organization that I created, it's mostly focused on promoting equality and protecting persons against discrimination. And it's mostly an educative organization in which we try to see how best we can inform, sensitize persons about their rights and about persons' dignity and respect to be treated equally and to be protected against discrimination. Of course, there are other goals that we have, such as advocacy, advocating for vulnerable groups of people, and even legal reform, suggesting legal reform, areas of reform in the country whereby, we think can be improved in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, particularly on our agenda. Don't know how soon this is on the state's agenda, but particularly on our agenda, we noticed that in St. Vincent and Grenadines, we lack comprehensive anti-discrimination laws that would protect persons from certain forms of discrimination, and therefore that is something that we believe in particular is needed. We also try to be a voice for vulnerable groups of people in society. So where we can speak up on certain issues or raise certain issues on behalf of others, we try to do that. We're a new organization, so hopefully as time goes by, you will be hearing and seeing more from us. We'll be more active. Other persons would come on board and see how we can help to make St. Vincent and Grenadines a better place for all of us. So those are some things that I do in my own personal time or with my own resource. I try to educate persons through my column. Even on social media, I'm always sharing things. I'm always putting out statements out there or sharing documents on WhatsApp or elsewhere. So I use my own platforms to educate others and promote human rights. And I also have created this organization, which I hope to continue to build over time. We're new. So hopefully as time goes by, as I said, hopefully we'll be more involved, get more involved in different things. Different persons will come on board who have different talents, different skills, knowledge, so that we can see how we can educate persons, advocate for others, be a voice for voiceless person, promote equality and non-discrimination in SVG, etc. My senior counsel, Rene Baptiste, was very extensive in terms of how persons can get involved in legal reform or legal revision, as she stated. So I'm not going to repeat everything that she has said. But one thing that is very important, especially for human rights, from a human rights perspective, is persons challenging unconstitutional and discriminatory laws. Unfortunately, in St. Vincent and Grenadines, there are certain prevailing views which one may say are based off of morality or traditions or religion pertaining to certain practices or behavior. And though international organizations or the United Nations or the Inter-American Human Rights System may have made certain proclamations, may have written certain reports to the state pertaining many issues that affect women's rights, or children's rights, or LGBT rights, or the rights of persons based on their race. So we see the legal reform in the country pertaining to especially human rights issues is very slow. We're going at a snail pace when it comes to certain human rights issues. And because of that, persons are left unprotected. They have to flee, literally flee St. Vincent and the Grenadines for their lives because of violence, hatred, prejudice, discrimination, and persons in privileged positions influence these behaviors, whether they're from the churches or politicians sometimes, or the music or even videos that are created perpetuate these types of negative behaviors and attitudes in society. And politicians have a great, heavy responsibility in the area of human rights. Parliamentarians, I should say, to create legal reform, to ensure that persons are protected, that they're respected, that their rights are not violated, violations are prevented, that they take positive steps. That's what fulfill means. They take positive steps to ensure that persons' rights are preserved and protected in society, whether it's creating policies, it's creating laws, amending laws, and so forth. So there are so many issues and so many things that could be talked about. pertaining to that, but I noticed that Council John, he mentioned issues such as same-sex relations. And we can see that this is one of the areas whereby persons who have fled the country for their lives, who have felt endangered and discriminated against, have decided that, you know, we can't sit down waiting for the government and the state to create change, to ensure that we are protected, that we're not criminalized. We have to do something about it, because if we sit down and wait, then nothing may never happen. And these backward laws that were inherited from colonialism, which our colonial masters have repealed and changed so long ago, and we still have them, we have to do something about it. So one of the powers that individuals have is that they can challenge laws that are inconsistent with the constitutional, unconstitutional. As my learned senior counsel Rene Baptiste noted, the Constitution is the supreme law of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. You know, and laws that are held, that are inconsistent, you know, with the Constitution are laws that are void and should be repealed, should be amended, should be struck off the books, whatever phrase that we want to use. And currently that case with Javin Johnson and Sean McLeish is currently before the courts. Council Waters works up Attorney General's chambers, so he may be more familiar with the status of the case and where it currently is. But that's one of the powers that individuals have. They have the power to challenge laws that are unconstitutional, that are inconsistent with the Constitution, that violate their fundamental rights and freedoms, whether it be right to life, liberty, freedom of expression, whether they're being discriminated against, and so forth. They have the power within themselves to challenge these laws. Of course, you know, they may need legal advice, and that's advice, because more than likely it's a constitutional action that they have to bring. But one of the things I've noticed in St. Vincent Grenadines is that I don't if it's because we are I don't want to use the word poor, but you know, we're a more developing society. Persons don't necessarily have a bunch of resources that they could just use to challenge a bunch of laws. So we seem to be a less litigious society compared to nations like the US and Canada and the UK, whereby if persons feel that this law is affecting them in any way, they go on court. They go on court. But sadly, we're more slower in the state. Certain things, of course, are challenged, but maybe not as proactive as maybe we could be regarding legal challenges to the state, unfortunately, because the state has certain legal obligations, and unfortunately, they are not doing certain things, and that's just the reality of it for whatever reasons, whether it's political, maybe it's going to offend certain people in society, and that's where we go back to law and morality. Just because you believe certain things because of your Christian faith or Islamic faith or atheistic faith or whatever belief, religious belief you may subscribe to, doesn't mean that persons in society, other persons, have to subscribe to those beliefs, because we live in a society of persons who come from such varied backgrounds, such varied beliefs, who choose to live their lives a certain way, are a certain way for one reason or the other, and you don't have the power to dictate to persons what they should do with their lives, especially in their own private time and in the privacy of their own homes. So we need to respect the rights of other persons. Yes, you have rights, but so do I. So does Council Baptiste, Council Waters, Council John, Council Bala, you know, and you should respect their rights as long as they're not harming you, they're not interfering with you and your rights. Okay, because we're not a theocracy. We're not a theocracy, and some persons need to understand that. Yes, a lot of persons in the state of St. Vincent and Grenadines come from a religious background. Are they practicing that religious background, that's another question. Sometimes we pick and choose what we want to follow or we don't want to follow. And then we impose what we think persons should be following in society on other individuals while we are not living up to the ideals of whatever we may be professing to believe. And when it comes to persons' views, we must recognize that in human rights, the majority can never be used to justify the violation of human rights of minorities, because that is what human rights are for. Human rights are there to protect the inalienable rights of minority groups. So whether you're a woman, your children, you're part of the LGBT community, whether you're from a racial minority, you have a disability, the list of categories can go on and on. Human rights is there to protect the minority. So we can never use what are the prevailing majoritarian views of the particular society. Yes, you may take it into account to know what the society as a whole believes or how they feel about a certain issue, but you can't use that to control other people, to punish people, to have them living less dignified lives than they are supposed to. Okay, well, we all have inalienable human rights, and again, our power, or one of the powers of individuals, is to challenge these laws so that the courts can declare them to be unconstitutional. As we would like to see those changes in society. So that's one of the ways that I want to highlight apart. And also all the things that my Lord Senior Counsel Renee Batiste said that I won't repeat, but I'm in agreement with many of the things that she said regarding the ways or the ordinary man can get involved to create legal reform in society.
Thanks, Badu. At this time, we'll take our final break, and when we come back, we'll tie up the loose ends and wrap up.
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? District Stairs is offering a 10% discount store-wide, plus free shipping. So if you've been wishing for a new living room, kitchen, or bathroom, we've got an array of tiles, vinyl, laminate floors, glass railings, glass shower enclosures, trims, and countertops to suit your taste. Check out our website at districtstairs.com or call us 289-200-7649. We're also on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Season's greetings from District Stairs.
Okay, welcome back again, ladies and gentlemen, and we are now in the final segment of our program for this evening. We are looking at law, morality, and justice. Is there a need for legal reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Before we took the break, we were talking about ways in which the lay persons can impact or implement law reform in St. Vincent. And so we're going to take a comment now from Counsel Kezron Walters. He is one of the barristers in the Attorney General Office.
Thank you, Chair. If you ask me, how can an ordinary person get involved in influencing legislative change in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? I would say the first step would be to approaching your representative. I mean, you voted for him. This is our government, whether or not you would have voted for our representative, etc. The government is there to make laws. Parliament is there to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we must first approach our representative and seek to influence change in that way. They are there to represent our views in Parliament. So we need to get to know our representatives and try to influence them in that way. The laws always start, as Councillor Betty said, with a white paper or a green paper, which just means a formulation of views on a certain topic that one would like to see reflected on a legislative agenda. Even if you do not have the necessary educational accolades or advancement, you do not think that you have such, you can still write and influence the thinking in the area. Write to your representative, write to the relevant minister, and see how you can push forward that need for legislative change in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. With regard to the age of consent, I would note that there is a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. If we look at, for example, the Child Justice Act, it says that a child means somebody who's under the age of 16. If we look at the Children Care and Adoption Act, it says that a child is somebody who is under the age of 18. If we look at the Status of Children Act, it says a child includes a person who has attained the age of 18. So who is a child? All of these acts give different definitions of a child. And then we look at the Marriage Act, which says if you are female and you're under the age of 15, you cannot get married. So a female 15 and above can get married. If you're a male under the age of 16, you cannot get married. A male 16 and above can get married. These are children, right? And then you look at the criminal code, which outlaws intercourse with a minor under the age of 15, under the age of 13. And you say these need to be harmonized. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done where it comes to the age of consent. Who can consent to have sex? Can a 15-year-old consent to have sex? Can a 15-year-old comprehend the intricacies of sex and the implications of sexual intercourse? Or a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old? How old do you have to be before you can intellectually and intelligently make the decision to have sexual intercourse? And then we spoke about sexual offenses and the need to revise sexual offenses laws, and there is an ongoing revision. There have been discussions about a sexual offenders registry. I note in Trinidad and Tobago they would have implemented a sexual offenders registry, and I do hope that sometime in the future St. Vincent and the Grenadines can follow suit. I note in California and in Australia there have been laws relating to stealthing, and I think, and I'm really hoping that St. Vincent and the Grenadines can jump a few years into the future and also implement laws relating to stealthing. With regard to LGBTI and Councillor Badu would have mentioned the existing case by Javin Johnson and Sean McLeish. I note that they would be challenging sections 146 and 148 of the Criminal Code relating to buggery. I can't say much about it. I know that it is before the court. It was before the Court of Appeal, and it was remitted back to the High Court in St. Vincent. I'm not certain when there'll be another hearing. I know that there have been similar challenges in Belize and in Trinidad and Tobago, and a challenge has also been filed in Dominica. And there's also been a similar challenge filed in Jamaica, which was withdrawn, I think. So we look to see what would be the outcome of that case. But I know that in our last review of the ICCPR, that's the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that we did report that there was not a strong appetite for legislative change in this area, although Councillor Badu would say that this would be a tyranny of the majority. I do, most persons in St. Vincent and the Grenadines would say that it's not time as yet to approach those issues just yet. Maybe sometime in the future. But
it's time.
Councillor Badu will say the time is now. But I guess a government in the future will have a mandate maybe to review laws relating to LGBTI, etc. Sentencing guidelines. I think most persons have been upset with the fact that a convicted rapist, for example, because he pled guilty on the first occasion, he would be able to benefit from the 1/3 discount, and this would mean that the years he may spend imprisoned would be less than, for example, somebody who took the courts for an entire trial for robbery or something like that. And they would say, look at that, yes? A convicted rapist is spending less time than somebody who is convicted for robbery. But if you, but the sentencing guidelines, as we have voted to before, are still fresh. They're still settling. And yes, a person who pleads guilty on the first occasion is entitled to a 1/3 discount in their sentencing. I think there's still more work to be done regarding the sentencing guidelines, and we'll see them. We'll see the problems and make the changes as we go forward. Regarding investment and taxes, etc., yes, we are competing with Barbados, etc., who have lowered the corporate tax income bracket very low for even the international business companies. But we are trying our own in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I know that with the aid of Compete Caribbean and CAIFA, etc., we are trying to draft a comprehensive investment act, much like there is in Grenada, etc., that will govern fiscal incentives and the like, so that it will give more certainty to foreign direct investment, etc., and that will aid in increasing and encouraging investment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I don't know if I can be of any further.
Well, my final question, and then after Council Bala tackles this final question, we'll just take brief closing remarks from all of the panelists, and then I will wrap up to end. Council Bala, do you envision that we'll have any further efforts for constitutional reform? We had an effort back in 2009 that was unsuccessful, but there has been some renewed calls for constitutional reform. What are your views on that, and if we need that sort of reform in St. Vincent?
Yes. While I'm not in position to say that we would have one, I would speak from my personal standpoint. I think we should have one. My feeling as it relates, or my opinion, I should say, as it relates to our constitution is something that was given to us. It is not ours. It was given to us by our colonial masters, and they said, here, take this, run with it. When we attempted to reform the constitution, it would have been something that belonged to us as a Vincentian people. It would have reflected us, how we feel, how we want to chart our future as a country. But the current constitution charts the future of what was given to us. So I would love to see us make an attempt to reform our constitution. And in reforming the constitution, I know we could go to CCJ without reforming the constitution, but I would love to see that in it as well, because the difficulty I find with us staying with the Privy Council is that there's also another overlord telling us how we should chart our future. So with a push or a look towards constitutional reform, I think it would open a lot of doors for us in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and it will help us feel like, we are truly independent, and we are not just saying that we are. And I know we're almost out of time, so
we're out of time.
I would subdue my further passion on the issue.
Closing thoughts, very, very briefly.
Okay, with regard to the Constitution, I would love to see us return to a debate on a reformed Constitution in St. Vincent. The 2009 Constitution had some really good things. For example, the aspirational clause on the minimum portion of female representation in Parliament. I would love to see that. back in there. The removal of the Queen as the titular head of the head of state. I would love to see that back on the agenda. I know that Barbados, by the end of this month, will remove the Queen as the head of state, and in so doing, the Westminster model would be modified. I'd love to see that here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well, although some persons would say, leave the Queen, leave the Privy Council, etc. I would also love to see us make the CCJ our final appellate court in criminal and civil matters, and not just for matters regarding the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. There's a lot of work to be done, but it's not impossible. We can do it. We're doing some bit by bit. We need some more. We need some more assistance in the Attorney General's chambers, and we're getting there. And I'm certain that by God's grace, we will get there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baptiste?
Oh, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful program, I think, listening to all the young advocates, looking at all the various positions in relation to the subject matter that we discussed, and even going to depth in some instances. But as we close and we're looking at constitutional reform, I was on the ground floor of this effort that failed in 2009. At the time it failed, Grenada then followed and said, oh, we tried to do everything. They'll do it in individual bills. It failed. Antigua then also tried the same thing, and it failed. You know, changes is incremental in our instances, and we must always look at our history. That will inform us. The thing is that it is an electoral matter, and we have been nurtured on electoral matters being the sides. You have a side. The reason that Barbados can do this is that there is no opposition. You remember how many seats? So there's always that step. We can't jump it as much as we like to be an Olympic athlete in order to get there. We have to go through the steps of getting that 2/3 to change the constitution. It is admirable to see the work that is being done by the CCJ, but you have persons who have constituencies that adamant we need people from outside because we can't trust each other. We don't trust you. You know, that is something that was done. It's part of the colonization process. In order to keep people on a certain level, we have to create this barrier, and that barrier is not easy to break in one generation. Yes, we can go back to it. It was a 7 to 9 year project. So we have something to work with. Maybe the new generation will be able to be more convincing so that we can get 2/3 and pass over the hump. And then you say that we have our homegrown constitution that belongs to us. The time will come because change is inevitable.
And Councillor Badu?
I like that last phrase that Councillor Baptiste used. Change is inevitable. The discussions this evening have been very informative. I've been blessed with knowledge from all of the panelists. You all have got me thinking, and that is what we need to do more in Vincentian society. We need to think more, and we need to emancipate ourselves from the shackles of our colonial masters. We need to be truly independent. We need to pave our own path as a society. And therefore, things that negatively affect our brothers and our sisters in society, we need to ensure that we really think about these things deeply and say to ourselves, is this how we want our St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be? Is this how we want our brothers and our sisters, our neighbors to be treated? The discussions have been very edifying. Of course, this whole topic is something that you can't really properly, digest and talk about in just 2 hours. This could go on for months, weeks, years, because there's so many little things that we can look in St. Vincent and the Grenadines pertaining to the laws that we have, where these laws came from and where we want to go, and how morality should impact these laws, if at all morality should have an impact on these laws, especially if persons hold views that are opposite to what certain segments of society may believe. And then in all of that, are we really doing justice? Are we doing justice? Are people being treated right? Are people being treated fairly, being treated equally without discrimination? Are their rights being upheld? Are their freedoms being advanced in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And for me, that is what's most important, because that's the area that I'm my little session today comes to an end. I just want all of us to, just do our part in helping to make St. Vincent and the Grenadines a better place, not just for some, not just for the rich, not just for the privileged, whoever they may be, but for everyone. And we can definitely do that together, not by one person, not by a few persons, but all of us working together to help to make St. Vincent and the Grenadines a better place for all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank all the panelists for taking the time out to be with us this afternoon, for sharing with us. I hope that we were able to get some more insight into the legislative process and how change takes place, how reform takes place, how revision takes place. And not only that, but we got some useful information too as to how you can get involved, whether it's from writing, airing your views publicly, and getting involved at the select committee stage, through constitutional challenges through the court system, or talking directly with your elected representatives and ensuring that policy, matters of law, are important when you are exercising your franchise in voting. So we just want to encourage you not to look at law reform as something that is, outside of the scope of influence of ordinary citizens, but it's a process that you can be involved in as well. And of course, we want to thank all our sponsors, Harun Bear, Digicel, District Stairs, Role Model Fruits, General Hardware, Computech, and East Caribbean Bottlers Incorporated for sponsoring these programs. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next week when we'll be back for another edition of On the Spot, right here on ASBO News Network.
Isn't it good to know that no matter where you are, you're covered by a company owned by Vincentians that understands your unique insurance needs? At Metrocint General Insurance Company, we've invested 50 years of service to guarantee that you have the peace of mind that you deserve. When it comes to motor vehicle, property, employer's liability, business insurance, and much more, we've got you covered. Our professional and friendly staff understands your needs and ensures you understand your options. Metrocint General Insurance Company.
Computech Limited is one of the oldest computer businesses in SVG. Computech supplies a wide range of desktop and laptop computers and printers to suit your home or business, and is the only company that provides a full range of IT solutions to our many customers across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Computech, your authorized service center for Dell, HP, and Lenovo. Ideally located in Kingstown on the corner of Egmont and Bay Street, opposite the Financial Complex building. Remember the name. Computech, 25 years and getting better.
Looking to give your home a new look for Christmas? District Stairs is offering a 10% discount store-wide, plus free shipping. So if you've been wishing for a new living room, kitchen, or bathroom, we've got an array of tiles, vinyl, laminate floors, glass railings, glass shower enclosures, trims, and countertops to suit your taste. Check out our website at districtstairs.com or call us 289-200-7649 We're also on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Season's greetings from District Stairs.